In this video, I'm going to be walking you through how to track cases for your accounts inside of Monday.com and then report on the number of cases, the revenue per case, and then the revenue per account, again, inside of Monday.com. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link below. We would love to help. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm inside of my example Monday.com system, like usual, right? And then what we want to do is obviously we have our accounts. Our accounts are ultimately our clients, or you can call them clients. It's entirely up to you. And then our clients submit cases to us for us to resolve. And then we charge our clients per case. You might charge a fixed rate per case, or you might charge a varying rate per case. And ultimately, you want to see the amount of revenue generated per account per month by the number of cases or by the revenue per case rolling up to the account. So we need to track our cases, we need to track our accounts, and then we need to report on that information. And I'll be walking you through all of that in this video. So the first thing that we're going to want to go ahead and do is create a new board here. And this board is going to be called our cases board. Okay, nice and simple. You can name this whatever you want, naturally, right? And then your privacy options are entirely up to you. So if you want your privacy options to be main, this means that the board is accessible by everyone inside of your Monday.com system, or private, so only you and select individuals have access to it, or shareable. If you'd like to share your board externally, you are more than welcome to. And then we need to select what we're managing in this board. Now, this is just a terminology thing, but I'm just going to go ahead and write in cases because that is what we are managing today. And then we can go ahead and press create board. So first and foremost, congratulations. We have created our cases board. This is where all of our cases for all of our clients are going to be managed at any given time. Okay. So this is going to be nuanced to your business, but I'm going to give you how I would see this, or at least my walkthrough of it, and then you can tailor it to how you would set it up. So the first thing that we're going to obviously want is our group new cases. So this is where all of the new cases that come in from all of our accounts are deposited. And then we've got open cases as kind of the next stage. A new case comes in, then we open the case. Then I think what we would probably have is escalated cases, which is when you've tried to open it, you've looked into it, realized that there's an issue or something beyond your area of expertise, perhaps, or whoever's handling the case. So they then need to escalate this to a manager, for example, and then you'll have closed cases. And that's pretty much it. Again, this is going to vary from business to business, but generally speaking, this is kind of the flow. So we've got new, open, escalated, and then we ultimately want to get all of our cases to close, right? So escalated will be in red, open I'll keep in the purple, and then we've got new. So those are our different groupings. You can add them or remove them as you see fit. The next thing that we need to do is set up our status option. So our status realistically just needs to reflect the group. So we've got new, which is the gray and the default value. We then have open. We can then use the red for escalated. There we go. And then we can go closed. And again, just reposition these, and I'll just change the color so it's a nice fancy purple. So then we've got new, open, escalated, and closed. Now we've set that up, what we can do, and before we actually go ahead and automate when the status changes to open, move item to group open, we just want to do something with our date column. So we've got a date column that's automatically populated when you create a new board inside of Monday.com. We're going to call this date created, and then we're going to go ahead and we will restrict the column editing so no one can make changes to that column. We're then going to add another date column, and this is going to be our date close. Date closed. This is the day in which the status of the case was equal to closed. This is going to automatically populate. Again, what we want to do is restrict the column editing. And then we want to go ahead and add a formula column. This formula column is going to work out the difference in days between date created and date closed. So all I'm going to write in the formula builder, AI assistant, the magical man that does everything, give me the difference between date created and date closed, and just hit enter. Just checking that's all working. Cool. Insert and then set formula. So this works out the number of days from date created and date closed. Now, what I would call this is TTC, which means time to close, or stands for time to close. And then again, I would restrict the column editing. Okay. So now if you can see here, this was created on the 21st. If I set this to the 28th, it gives me 7 days time to close. So now we just want to automate all of this. Actually, before we do, I'm just going to delete this files column. Actually, we'll keep it. We might need it later on. But anyway, let's go and automate. So automate top right-hand corner. go to manage, and then create automation. And then what we firstly want to do is say when status changes to new, move item to group new. So we're just going to run through the different variables here. So then we go create automation again. When status changes to open, move item to group open, create automation. And then we go when status changes to escalated, move item to group escalated, and then finally, and obviously we have our closed as well. Now when status changes to closed on here, we want to move item to group closed, and also set the date closed to today. So that's another important factor. That's kind of why we set up the time stuff or the date stuff before. So that means that the date closed will automatically populate when the status changes to closed. Awesome. Now the final automation we just need to create is when item created, we want to set the date created to today. So when item created, set date created to today. So that covers both the date created and date closed, which means it'll automatically work out the difference between the two here. So as you can see, I've got my example case that's just come in. There we go. And then it's going to automatically populate the date created, as you can see, which it has done. Now let's just push this back and imagine that it's in the past for whatever reason. And then I can go ahead and close this case. That will then move it to the group, case closed, and automatically set the date closed to today and give me the TTC as 7 days. I can then use the TTC to get an average of the amount of days it takes to complete any case, or cases based on variables like case type, for example. So now we need to go ahead and actually enter in our variables. So we want to go ahead and firstly add, let's say, a priority column. So this is defined by the end user. So whoever is responsible for submitting this form, they can define the priority. Now, I would reposition. I don't know why they do it this way. In my head, it's backwards. Start low, then it goes to critical, not critical first. This is the problem with a priority column, or at least what I have found in my years of experience, is that everything is always critical. It's never like a medium. It's always either low, of low importance, or low significance, or it is the most important thing ever. No one can really work out what medium and high means. Anyway, conversation for another day. This will allow people that are submitting cases to assign a priority to the case. We then probably have a long text column. This is just going to be a description of the case, or description of issue. Description of issue. There we go. And then what else might we have? We might have a status, which is, you could actually use a label. Labels and status columns are pretty much the same, apparently. Well, they are the same. They're meant to be different, but they are the same. But you might have type 1. So this might be like I don't know. I'm just trying to think of examples for whatever business this might be. I don't really know. Let's just say issue 1. Issue 1, and then let's go issue 2, and then issue 3, and then we'll bump that up there, apply, and then we'll just have issue type. So people can define the issue type. They can also submit the files. That's why we kept the file column. So if there are any files that are associated with this case that people want to kind of attach to the case so they can see what's going on, then that's absolutely fine. The next kind of basic stuff that we want to go ahead and add is an email. So this is going to be the email of the person that is submitting the case. We also probably want a phone number so we can see if we need to call them, we have that information available. That column didn't work. Every time I film, there's an issue. And then we go ahead and add a text column. This text column is just going to be the name of the person. Now you might choose to do first name and last name. The reason that you might look to do that, so you might have a text column for first name and a text column for last name, because then you can email hey Nick, as opposed to, let's say, hey Nick Boardman, for example. So it might be first name, and then you might have just a separate text column which is last name. Again, if you're not fussed about that, then just put them in one. But you would say, hey Nick, just emailing to confirm that CRM Crew has received your case and we're actively working on resolving the issue, as opposed to hey Nick Boardman. Again, it's just a nicety, but it's up to you. So then we would have last name. Cool. Now what we want to do, and this is where it gets important, because obviously we want to associate our cases with our accounts. We're going to want to extract the email domain from the email column to a text column, which we're then going to use to auto link the case to the account. Okay, so let me walk you through this. What we want to do is go ahead and press the plus button. We're going to go to more columns, and we want to use AI powered columns on the left hand side. Yes, ooh, fancy AI. And then what we want to do is we want to extract information from one column into another column. So we've got our email column here, and we want to extract info from, let's see if it lets me. I don't think, no, it does. Extract email address. Well, actually, I want to extract the domain name from the input being the email. So let's just see what happens. So what we're saying is we want to get the domain, which is crmcrew.com, from the email address that the person has submitted the case from. Now, it's important here, this is really important, that the people that are submitting the case are using their work email, and also you have the domain for that account. So crmcrew.com is the domain. If I was submitting the case, I would submit nick@crmcrew.com, and then we would extract the domain from the email address that would allow us to auto connect to the account or the client record in the other board, which we're going to set up in a minute. You're going to run into issues, however, and there's literally not much you can do about this within Monday anyway. You're going to run into issues if they're using different emails. So if they use their personal email to submit a case, it's not going to be easy to associate it with an account. So you can see here, we got extract domain name from email, save and apply, also apply to empty existing items. We don't need to go ahead and do that. So now what we can go ahead, and you just untick that option, is when this changes, or I think, yeah, when it changes, let's just go ahead and add an email in here. nick@crmcrew.com. It should then automatically extract the domain from the email to the extract info magic AI column, and we're going to call this domain. Okay, and then what I want to do is just want to go ahead and restrict the column editing on here, so no one can interfere with this particular column. So that has clearly worked. crmcrew.com has been pulled from the email address nick@crmcrew.com, which is absolutely crucial for this setup. Now, the other stuff that we probably want to look at here is obviously our revenue, our cost associated with the case, and ultimately the profitability. So we would have a numbers column, and this will be our revenue. And this can be done manually. This can be done automatic or with automations. It's entirely up to you. You need to think about how you bill for your cases. So if we were to take an example for my business, a case would come into the organization. So one of our clients would submit a case. We would log time against that particular case and charge out that time at the rate that's already been established between us and the client. And then the cost would be who I assigned and their hourly rate, so their hourly cost to the business versus what we billed out at, so the hourly rate that we charge the client. So our revenue would ultimately be the total hourly rate billed out per hour times by the number of hours worked. And then our cost would be the time cost of the person working on the case per hour times the amount of hours worked on the case. And then our profit would be obviously the revenue minus the cost, giving us our profitability for that particular case. So, but that's for me. We work in time, right? For instances like this. However, if you are a business and you just have an agreed amount that you charge per case, which I know some businesses do, then this actually becomes a little bit easier, potentially anyway. You still need to think about the time tracking component for the cost though. So even if you charge the same amount per case, you then need to factor in the cost per case. The cost is likely to come from time, potentially materials as well. That then needs to be tracked against the case within monday.com. That's separate to this video. But obviously it's possible. Otherwise it'd be a 5-hour video. So I'm not going to go into that. So we've got our revenue. I'm going to add another numbers column, and that's going to be our cost today. And that would be our cost. Again, you can manage time tracking within Monday. Time submissions are associated with a particular case. And I've even got a video on my channel explaining exactly how to do that. So you can go again and go ahead and watch that and then put the two together if you want to. But it's all out there. So we just want to customize the numbers column, set the unit cost as the dollar, and we'll do the same for this one here in the dollar. So we've got our revenue. Let's say our revenue for this particular case was $500, and then our cost was 200. And then what we can go ahead and do is add a column to the right, and then we can add a formula column, and this is going to work out the profit. Oh, pressed the wrong button there. Profit. There we go. What did I write there? There we go. So revenue minus cost, hit enter. Just using the AI assistant to do some basic formulas here, and then click the bottom summary bit, and then we can set the currency or the unit, and then hide the column summary, and then we can go ahead and we can restrict the column editing. So this is our basic case setup within Monday.com. We've got a priority, an issue type, a file, a description of the issue, who submitted the information. We've got a revenue, cost, and profit. We have the domain scraping, which is going to help us connect to our accounts. And then you can go ahead and add whatever additional information that you need for your business. We've also got the person that's assigned to the case. So let's say I assign myself to every single case. You can also add, if you wanted to, add column to the right, another people column. And this is escalated person, for example. And we can hide the column summary here. And then what we could do is we could say when an item is created. So let's just run through this. When create automation, when an item is created, assign. And what we could do is we could assign the case based on a variable, the variable in this instance being something like the issue type. So when an item is created and the issue type is equal to issue 1, then we'll assign, in this case, we'll assign, let's see, myself as the person. Okay, so if it's issue type number 1, because that's my area of expertise, it gets assigned automatically. Now we could say also when an item is created and status is something, and then issue type is 2, then assign person, and we could assign, let's say, Alex, because this is his specialty, and we would just want to assign it as the person column, not the escalated person column. Cool. So now if a new case is created and the issue type is 1, then it gets assigned to me. If the issue type is 2, it gets assigned to Alex because that's his expert area, and then each person can get notified. Okay, what we can also do is we can then obviously set up the escalation process, which is create automation. We could say when status changes to escalated, and then we can also say and only if, and let's say the status issue type is equal to issue number 1, then we go ahead and assign person. So we then assign, let's say, Sakil to the escalated person. So if I can't fix issue 1, then it gets escalated to our expert person in-house, which would be Sakil. Sakil can then look at it. So you can set up those kind of variables. Probably going to want to go ahead and just restrict the column editing on the person column so people can't reassign like cases and things like that to other people, etc., etc. But that is now possible. So hopefully that gives you an idea as to how to manage the assignment of cases. Obviously, you can extrapolate this a lot further. The more variables you have associated with your case as well, the more you can kind of assign stuff. So if you've got a number of different status columns or drop-down columns relating to a particular case, then that's quite easy to deal with. And then you can path that based on the data points that are submitted for that particular case to the right person. So cool. Now we've got our cases set up. What we want to do is set up our clients board or our accounts board. So press the plus button top left-hand corner again and go board. And this time I'm going to call it, let's just call it clients, just to keep it simple. Privacy options remain the same, and then in this instance we are dealing with our clients. So there's not a great deal that you need to track on here, if I'm being honest with you. I would probably have one group. I'd just keep this really simple. I'd have all clients. You might then delineate between active and inactive clients. You might have a date created as well. So we would have date created here, and then we would restrict the column editing and do exactly settings, restrict column editing, do exactly what we did with the automation when a new item is created. So when item is created, then we set the date created to today as an example. And there's not a great deal else. I mean, this is entirely up to you what you want to track on here. You might have all of their tax information, their billing information, their billing point of contact. You could create a contacts board that connects to your clients board. You'd then be able to see all of the contacts associated with that particular client. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. You've got the person column. This could be, let's say, the account manager for that particular client. What we do want to do though, which is really important, is we want to have a text column, and this text column is going to be our domain. Okay. And the reason this is important is I'm going to come on to why in a moment. But you can see we've got our domain now. Just trying to think what else we would want. We might have, let's say, a label, which is the industry, for example. So let's say industry, and whether they work in manufacturing. Maybe you only help a particular type of business. I don't know. You can just track any client related information here. The only thing that's blatantly important for us in this setup today is the domain column. Okay. And the other thing being a connect boards column. So we need to create a connect boards column, or at least a connection between your clients board and your cases board. So we're going to go ahead and use a connect boards column to do this. So connect boards, select boards, cases, and then we want to press create a two-way connection down the bottom here and just press connect boards. So these are all of the cases associated with this particular client. And then we could go ahead and go back to our cases board, and you can see we've got linked clients because we press create two-way connection. And then in any instance, there's only ever going to be one client associated with this particular case. So you could have multiple cases, but there's only ever one client. To make sure that that's set up properly, you can go to settings, customize, and just unselect allow linking to multiple items. This means that you can only link to one client for a case. I can't imagine there would ever be an instance where multiple clients are associated with the case. So now we've got that connection set up, we'll be able to see all of the cases here. What we can then do is we can mirror over information. So we can mirror from our cases board onto our clients board. And let's say we want to mirror over the total client revenue, for example. So total revenue. So this will show us all of the revenue for all of the cases associated with this particular client. We could also add another mirror column, and then we could see total profit. So then again, connect cases, and then we're looking for profit here and show sum, total profit. So now we can see the profit for this particular client, total. Then we could go back to our cases here. And what we could also do, if you wanted to, you want to get really fancy, you could add a new formula column. And this formula column would say, show me profit. So we say, show me profit only where date created was this month. Now, this could be very useful. So you can insert that date created month and year, date created equals year. So let's say date created. This doesn't appear to have worked. Is there profit for that? 25th of August, that's this month. Maybe this won't work. I'll come back to this. This will be helpful at a later stage, more when we're doing the reporting than anything else. I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. But now we've got our clients board. I'm going to go ahead and let's just imagine I'm a client of myself, naturally, CRM crew. And I can go ahead and put in the domain. Now, this is something you'd have to manually do. Shock horror. People have to do things in systems. There are a lot of people that seem to think that everything under the sun can be automated, like systems just make your tea and coffee and everything else. But unfortunately, that is not the reality. People do have to enter in information. So we've got our domain here. That is the domain for this particular. So now what we want to do is we want to create an automation on our cases board. And to do so, we go automate. And instead of manage, we want to go to create. And we want to search up the top here. Column changes connect. That's exactly word for word what you want to search for. And you're looking for this connected and mirror columns. This is a template automation. You can't make this yourself inside of the manage area. And we're saying when column changes, connect the item where this column matches another column in another board by this logic. Sounds complicated. It's not. So when the column changes, being when the domain fancy AI column changes on the cases board, then we want to connect another board. So we want to connect to our clients. How many clients boards do I have? Just one. That's incredible. And then we want to go ahead and select the column that we're mapping to, which is the domain in the clients board. And then where the domain in this board matches. So saying when the domain column changes on the cases board, connect the item using the connection column that we've set up, where the domain column on the cases board matches the domain column in the client's board. And then by this logic, you can just leave and go ahead and press create automation. So now this is obviously very useful, because once the automation creates itself, the case, when submitted, will automatically link to the client record based on the domain. The only caveat to this is Monday.com has these AI token things, which means that essentially when every time an AI column runs, it charges a token, and I think you have to pay for more tokens, of course, with Monday.com. So that's just something to be mindful of. That is now loaded. Awesome. I was going to refresh that, but that seems to have worked now. So now if I go ahead, add a new case, and I'll put in an email address, which will be info@crmcrew.com, then our magical AI column is going to extract that information. And what's going to happen once you see it's extracted is it should then automatically connect to the client record, which it has done because the domain has changed and the domain matches the domain on the client's board. Okay, which is obviously really helpful. Now we can also go ahead and take this step further. We can restrict the column editing so people then can't change the client record as well, can't interfere with things. We also might say that people can't change the email column, so none of our automation can then be messed up. What we're then going to want to go ahead and look at is a form that we can distribute externally to all of our clients, so they can then go ahead and submit cases which will come into our board, automatically connect to them as a client based on the email address that they submitted, and then we can go ahead and start looking to report on this information. So in order to create a new form, what we need to do is press plus button, top left hand corner here, and we're looking for the form option. Now, if you have never created a form inside of Monday.com before and you're not familiar with anything, I've got, again, a separate video on my YouTube channel, which you are more than welcome to watch. So I'm not going to spend ages walking through this. Essentially, all we're looking to do is just hide the questions that we don't want on the form, like date closed, we don't want. Date created, we don't want. Cost, we don't want. Revenue, we don't want. Domain, we don't want. Okay, so there's a lot that we can just go ahead and hide. Phone, email, first name, last name, however, is required. In order to submit the form, we need to go ahead and set this as required. So we've got first name, last name as well. We want a description of the issue, so we want that to be required. Files, if people want to upload files, they can do. This might not be a necessity. We want an issue type so they can explain what the issue is. We also want to make sure that the priority is required. We don't want the status column because that's an internal thing, not an external thing. We don't need the person, we don't need the escalated person, we don't need the client record, and then this is the name of the case. We would probably go ahead and make required as well. So then once we've kind of set this up, we can just untick show hidden content, bottom left hand corner here. This will remove everything bar the questions that we're asking on the form. Okay, so log your case here. So now this form can be distributed. You can go ahead and press preview, and this form will ask all of the questions that is relevant to your board as you can see fit, as we have literally just created a moment ago. So if I just go back to our cases board, I'm going to go to the main table. I'm just going to delete everything so it's not a complete and utter mess. And let's just delete that one as well, just so you know that it's super clear what's going on. So if I go back to that tab, and I'm going to go ahead, Nick Boardman example case. The priority, naturally, is going to be critical. The issue type is issue number 1. I haven't got any files to upload. This is the biggest issue in the entire world. And then I'll go ahead and put my information in. So Nick Boardman, and then Nick, this is at crmcrew.com. And then phone, +44, as I'm based in the UK. And then phone number 07777777777. I think that will work, we'll see. And then press submit. That is now going to create a new case record inside of our Monday.com system automatically. So now what is going to hopefully happen is the email address is going to be extracted into our domain column which it has been, which will then automatically connect to our client record, which it has. You can see all of the information is automatically populated for our case. And then I can go ahead and say, oh, right, our revenue for this case, when I kind of imagine I am now the internal person responsible for managing this case. I mean, I am, because I've been assigned it. Our revenue is 400. I think our cost is probably going to be like 200. So that's £200 profit for this particular case. I can then go ahead and say this is now an open case. We're actively working on this. Now you can go ahead and use the plus button on the left hand side here and communicate with other people internally about this case. So this is kind of like a Twitter updates function within Monday or X, shall we say, and I can go ahead and mention someone and communicate with them. Now, if there's a terrible issue with this case, I can go ahead and escalate it. So because this is an issue type 1, I believe this is going to escalate to Sakil, which it has done. So we can then, he's been assigned this case because it's escalated. He can then, or we can then set up automations to notify him, but he will get a notification anyway. And then once the escalation has been sorted, we can then close the case. And you can see we've magically run through that entire process from start to finish. And we can see here that the time to close was 0 days. This was a very quick case to close. Now, because it is cases, you might even look to track time as well. So what you could do is, if you wanted to, is you go automate and say when an item is created, set date created today, click into this and then also include the time. Do the exact same thing. So let's just update the automation for that. And then what you could do is when status changes to close, move on to it and date closed, and then also include the time. So when status changes to close cases, set date close to today. So now what you could do is you could adjust the automation. You just say, give me the difference in hours between start time and end time. The reason you might look to do this is because you try and close cases within hours, not days. So that is obviously a factor to consider. But now we've got this set up, you can distribute this form externally. Obviously, you can make changes to the form. There's design functions and logos you can add to it, make it look a bit better. But this is your case process. Now, you can also use the Kanban view to manage your cases. So you've got obviously your maybe a slightly more preferable view here. You can click into the cog. You can customize what's shown on the card. So description of issue. You can have the revenue, the cost, the profit. You can show the column name if you want to as well. And you can see here it's really easy to just drag and drop through the different stages of the process. So you can use Kanban view if you would like to. Now, obviously that case is associated with that client, but ultimately now what we want to do is we want to report on the information. So we can go ahead and press the plus button and we can create a new dashboard. And this is going to be, I'll just call this case reports, for example. Again, privacy options are entirely up to you. And then we want to be managing our cases, and also we might want to put in some client information as well. So I'd select both cases and client boards and just go ahead and press done. And now this is loaded, we can go ahead and add some widgets. So we can look at a variety of different data points here. What I preferably want to look at, and I'm just going to keep this simple for this video, is I want to see the revenue per month by account. Okay, so how much money and revenue did we generate per month by account? The way we're going to define per month, by the way, is not date created, but in fact date closed, because date created is not an accurate indicator because the case is open. So we'll go to settings here, and then our chart type is going to be a stack bar. Our x-axis, if we just go to boards first and just unselect the clients board, we just want the cases board. Our x-axis is going to go ahead and be our date closed. Our stack by is going to be the client, and then our y-axis is going to be one by one, and it's going to be revenue. Okay, and then you can add benchmark lines if you want to. On the stack bar as well, you might want to do an expanded stack. Now I'm going to show you what this looks like when you've got multiple clients. So let's say we've got CRM Crew and then we have Apple. Hit enter. Now let's just duplicate this case without updates, as I don't need it. And then I'm going to unassign this CRM Crew and I'll assign this to Apple. Then I'll change the revenue to, let's say, 1,500 for this case. And then you can go back to our case reports and we can see the revenue per month by the client or the company. You can then click into settings and then you can either have the expanded stack or you can unexpand the stack. And then you can see the total revenue by account per month. Now what we can do is just duplicate this and we can do exactly the same, but as opposed to revenue, we can do profit per month by account. and go to three dotted button, go to settings, and then the only thing we need to change is the y-axis, and that be the profit. Okay, so you've got a couple of options here. You can also then look at cases by priority. You could then look at, let's say, cases by issue type per month. So let's just do that. So we go add widget, a chart again. I'm gonna say cases by issue type per month. You could even go cases by issue type by client per month if you wanted to. But let's go settings and then chart type standard bar graph. X-axis is going to be on boards, by the way, just unselect clients again. X-axis is going to be cases by issue type per month. We use the date created here, and then the y-axis is going to be the number, or count items. We actually need to use a stack bar graph here, my bad. So y-axis, x-axis is going to stay date created, stacked by the client issue or the issue type, and then the y-axis in this instance is going to be all at once, customized, blah 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 blah. You can see we've got 2 here. If I go back to my cases, change this to an issue type 2, you can see that that then reflects. And then also what we can do, go to settings, and then we can stack by and expand that stack as well if you wanted to. So you can see cases by issue type per month as an expanded stack. You could look at cases by issue type by client per month. And then there are a ton of other things you can do, like average time to close by client, etc, etc, etc. This is typically more nuanced to what you as a business need to track. But hopefully this gives you an idea as to what's possible. If you have any questions, queries, or requests, drop a comment in the video below and I'll do my absolute best to get back to you, answer the question. If the question is really good, I will make a video answering the question or the request. If you would like us to help you set up stuff like this for your business, check out the link below. We would love to help, whether it be this or more complicated things like automations, integrations, even using AI. The application of AI in business is relatively new, but there are definitely use cases. So check out the link below, book a call, have a conversation with me. Anyway, hopefully this video has been somewhat helpful, and I will hopefully see you soon. Goodbye.